and welcome to the Europe Conversation. I'm Stefan Grobe. My guest today was nominated as Political Talent of the Year by the parliamentary press in the Netherlands in 2013. Living up to that nomination, he spent a decade in the Dutch Senate and House, served as finance and foreign minister before joining the European Commission. I'm very excited to welcome the European Commissioner for Climate, Net Zero and Clean Growth, Wopke Hoekstra. Thank you, Commissioner, for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let me start with a personal question. You are the father of 4 children. Now, to what extent does that inspire you in your fight for more climate protection?
Well, in any case, it means I always have a lot to explain back home because they ask about my work. Not only our generation is preoccupied by climate change, but certainly also the kids in school. And they have turned into quite fanatic recyclers back home.
That is very good. Now, last year marked the 10th anniversary of the landmark Paris Climate Agreement. What is the agreement's legacy in the EU?
I think it is absolutely huge. It is probably the most important thing we have done as humanity in setting out the course going forward. So, of course, there is a lot of pushback. Of course, there is more needed. Of course, the damage that we have in front of us is really dramatic. And at the same time, Paris is a beacon and has really shaped the behavior of the last 10 years. And will continue to do so going forward.
Now, you mentioned it. Today's reality is that climate policy, the EU Green Deal, is under pressure, under political pressure. How do you feel these headwinds, and how do you cope with them?
I mean, I think there are 2 things at the same time. Indeed, in some cases, there is a bit of pushback. At the same time, what people do realize is that the combination of climate, of competitiveness, and of independence truly is hugely important. And we experience that, of course, today with the horrible energy crisis. We already had a very good climate objective to get rid of fossil fuels and move into renewables and nuclear and electrification. There was also already a very good reason to do that just for financial reasons, because energy in Europe simply is too expensive. But we now learn the hard way that we are dramatically dependent on the stuff that we have to import. We are at the mercy of international affairs, and we cannot allow that. We cannot expose our citizens and our companies to this type of a vulnerability, so that we need to change.
You were in Colombia recently for the first ever global talks to accelerate the shift away from fossil fuels. What did this conference achieve?
So what it brought together was a group of like-minded countries that want to double down on accelerating. To be quite honest, the process of multilateralism and the COPs is imperfect at best, and particularly the last COP was also very, very difficult. So we need to change that system and at the same time be realistic, because if some people want to spoil it, that is possible, because it is a system that lives by unanimity. So bringing together a group of countries with more ambition, a coalition of the willing, if you will, I think is a fruitful way forward. I think it is testimony to the success that the organizers, Colombia and the Netherlands, managed to pull that off this quickly. And it is now up to this group to see what we can do more together going forward.
You were also the EU's chief negotiator at the EU Climate Conference in Dubai 3 years ago. I want you to tell us a little about the atmosphere in the rooms. Is it emotional? Are people committed to the same cause? Or are this just lawyers haggling over every comma in the text?
It is a combination, and
or a mix.
And there's certainly a lot of emotion, and I mean, whatever group of people, if you put them in a room and you lock them up for some 24 hours, I mean, just because they all become tired, emotions will be visible at some point.
That's the moment when the deals are struck, right?
To some degree, yes. And of course, there is also always innuendo. There is a bit of theater. People typically master the whole playbook of any negotiation. So you will see that in front of you. What the essence of Dubai, of course, was that we managed to basically kiss alive a supermajority that was in favor of more action. And in the end, this was, I think, an unexpected success for diplomacy. The tripling of renewable energy, the doubling of energy efficiency, the statement about transitioning away from fossil fuels. It was a landmark result. It was one of the best COPs, frankly speaking, since Paris.
So today Europe is facing another energy crisis fueled by the war in the Gulf, the war in Iran, while we're still dealing with the fallout from another energy crisis, of course, sparked by the war in Ukraine. Isn't that a great opportunity for an EU climate commissioner to tout renewable energies?
Yes and no, and the no is, and that is maybe where I'm a bit cautious. Look, I mean, if you're fueling up your car back home, or you're dealing with a higher energy bill, and then politicians come to you and say, well, isn't that fantastic, and isn't that a great opportunity? I think you maybe have a bit of a different emotion. What is true, and where you are absolutely right, is that the only way to get out of this nightmare, the only way to get rid of this dependency is to ensure more homegrown energy. And that means more electrification, more renewables, more heat pumps, more interconnectors between our member states, more nuclear. That whole mix is needed. And
including nuclear.
Including nuclear. And if you look back at our history and you think about the oil crisis of 1973, the crisis that we saw in 79 after the Iranian Revolution, indeed 2022, and now again, every single time we see how vulnerable Europe is, how little energy we have ourselves. We are a resource-scarce continent, so we have a huge objective, again, for climate, for competitiveness, but also for independence, to make more of this stuff ourselves. That is the way going forward.
I remember that, by the way, in '73, when my father was not allowed, like everybody was not allowed to drive on the highways on Sundays.
Exactly.
To save energies. Now, some countries like France are doubling down on the transition to clean energy in response. Will this become an EU-wide movement?
Absolutely, and France is doing a very good job there. It's exactly linked to your previous question. Let's make sure we take the opportunity out of this nightmare, and we use this to accelerate what we're already planning to do. And again, if you think about these previous events, so 73, 79, and 2022, every single time, our response has been positive in the sense that we have realized that we had to become more independent. At the same time, I think the lesson is also that after every previous crisis, we actually should have been more radical. We should have been more forward-leaning, and that is what we need to do now. The world is full of geopolitical turmoil. It could well be that this is not the last episode. And we owe it to our citizens and our companies that we're not gonna, confront them with higher prices during the next crisis. Whether that is in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, no one knows. We have to solve this.
On the other hand, some of the world's greenest countries that are endowed with fossil fuel resources, such as the Netherlands and Denmark, are eyeing more drilling in the short term. What do you make of this?
I personally think that
understand this, or
no? I mean, it's if you look at where we are today, my read is it is truly better to double down. By the way, there are differences between those two countries. Denmark is further advanced, also doesn't face the net congestion. As far as I understand it, that the Netherlands is facing. So, of course, there are always specificities that you need to deal with in a national context. But overall, there simply is no substitute than to fast forward. And again, that is that whole mix of electrification, of nuclear, of solar that we so desperately need. And by the way, the Danes, but also the Swedes and the Finns have done an amazing job in the last couple of years in doing exactly that.
I think the core question here is, can Europe secure its own energy? Is that really possible? How long does it take? And what is needed to do this?
We absolutely can. Of course, we cannot do it in the next few years, right? Gas will continue to be a transition fuel for years to come. Energy demand, also because of what we see in terms of development of AI, will go up rather than down, even with all the energy efficiency measures that we'll probably have up our sleeves. But the more independent we become, the more homegrown we become, the less vulnerable we become. So even if you have a bit of a, let's say, long tail of fossil fuels, then that in any case is way better than the current situation, where we're just heavily dependent on the oil and the gas that we get from outside. We truly, and I said it before, we are at the mercy of others. And of course, it was smart to get rid of Russian gas, but we replaced that by, well, maybe a bit more renewables, but also by dependency on American LNG, Qatari LNG, and LNG from others. Is that a completely safe bet? Well, I guess we have second thoughts about that, right? Just look at what is happening across the globe, and even those who might not get their LNG going through the Strait of Hormuz are still very vulnerable because these are global markets.
Now, the overall political goal in this town has become improving European competitiveness. To what extent is this putting you and your portfolio under pressure? I mean, we just need to open the newspapers. We rarely read about climate issues because there's so much else going on. But how do you deal with this? Do you feel this, and how do you try to argue against it?
It's really things that go hand in hand, because if you think about competitiveness and you think about what are the veins of our industry, it's energy. And the reality is that our companies, and particularly, of course, heavy industry that are very dependent on energy, are being confronted with very high energy prices compared to the Americans, but also others. It's a competitive disadvantage, and that is because we have to import the stuff. We're paying more, and then in many cases, European countries are also taxing more than maybe other nations. So that is a complicated mix, and that is exactly the reason why we need to fast forward this transition. Where I'm absolutely with those companies is that alone, fixing the energy problem alone, is not going to be enough. We will need to do much more to embark on truly a single market for capital, for people, and so on. We need to radically simplify because, frankly speaking, we have made life too difficult for our companies.
And what about the infrastructure? Because we talk about transition, etc. Infrastructure comes to mind, and I'm thinking of a charging station for cars, for instance. This is what every consumer in the EU feels. Now, it's still the case that I think 3/4 of all charging stations in the EU are based in the Netherlands, Germany, and France. Why does it take so long? Are the others just deaf, or what's going on?
You're absolutely right. We have more homework to do, and that shows that there is also clearly an opportunity, but also an obligation for member states to do more. Here's the good news, and indeed, the countries you were mentioning, I would add the Scandinavians to that list that have the most electrified car park of all.
Well, certainly Norway.
Which is let's say not yet a member of the European Union. Let's not tease them too much. I'm a huge fan of the country, but they're also indeed they have a truly electrified car park. What is the good news? If you look at the type of cars that now already are being put onto the market in terms of radius, in terms of quality of the engine, in terms of how quickly they can load, we are in a completely different dimension than we were some 4 or 5 years ago. And if I listen to experts, they're telling me, look, the best car that is, or the car with the longest radius that is currently being put on the market is maybe some 700, 800 kilometers, at least in testing. Maybe it's a bit less in reality. The number will only go up. Now, what they are telling me, and again, they are the experts, they're telling me, look, 1,000 kilometers, somewhere in the next 5 to 10 years, will clearly come in sight. If that is the case, that gives you a completely different picture in terms of what your loading infrastructure would need to look like. Because of course you would need more quantity, but you would not need it maybe at every corner of the street. So I think we're up for a lot of positive surprises in this specific domain.
Okay, who says infrastructure also says grids. Where are we here right now? There's also some sort of, problem. Are the grids strong enough?
Yeah, I mean, we have an awesome amount of work ahead of us. Let's just be very honest. We're not nearly there. We need to invest billions and billions in the grid, and in my view, that will ask for public money. But I think we need to be unorthodox. We also need to allow semi-public or private money. Think about pension funds and other large investors, because the amount of money we'll need is simply so large. Next to that, we need way more intelligence, maybe AI or other tools, because we're not making use of the electricity in the smartest possible way, and that will give you percentage points extra.
All these things are known for a long time, right? But still, we're not making the progress that we want.
We are. I think if you look at what we did in the last year, indeed also seizing the opportunity with the package that we came out with 2 weeks ago, with the grids package that Jurgensen launched in, I believe, December of last year. With actually each of these measures, we're taking steps. I think where you are right and where we need to be self-critical, we're not yet meeting the bar, and much more is needed, right? So let's be as forward-leaning as we can, because every euro invested in this transition is well spent. Again, because we are so vulnerable.
As every child knows, climate change ignores borders. Now, you mentioned Norway earlier. What are the EU's international partners in the fight against climate change?
It's a range of groups, and by the way, let me echo what you're saying. It's one of the complicated things of climate change is that indeed it doesn't discriminate. If you were able to just fix it in your own backyard and then you would be off the hook, that would make things way easier, right? But that's simply not the case. The planet doesn't care where we pump stuff into the air. If it happens, we all are living in a place that is heated up. With one specific problem for Europe, Europe is heating up more quickly than the others. So we have a disproportionate incentive to make sure that we don't do just our homework ourselves, we do it also with others. That is where the partners come in, and there are various groups, and we try to build bridges all over the world. But clearly, first, there is the group of, let's say, Norway, Canada, Australia, the UK, with whom we work very closely together, given that they are so like-minded. Secondly, we also work together very closely with our friends from Latin America, hence the conference of last week. And it is not a coincidence that there was a European and a Latin American country that were organizing it. But also more broadly with the Global South. If you think about the small islands, our friends in Africa, our friends in Asia, the success of the conference in Dubai that you just mentioned, at the heart of that was that we managed to create this supermajority that crossed the north-south divide. And that is, I think, the name of the game going forward.
You did not mention our friends in the US and in China. I guess it's a little more subdued.
Well, they're in different categories, right? So with the Americans, we worked exceptionally closely together, John Kerry in particular, in Dubai. In Baku with John Podesta, his successor. But the reality is that Americans have checked out on this topic, and that is, I mean, it's very unfortunate. Yeah. But I have to take the world as it is, not as I would like it to be.
All right, fascinating conversation. Wopke Hoekstra, EU Climate Commissioner. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.